Law Center, Power Coalition. We are super excited for our partners. Thank you to our partners for partnering with us on this. Also, too, at JDC, we believe our mission is very simple: to reduce the barriers of individuals with criminal records. Also, too, every day we work to expand justice, whether it's in our expungement clinics or our driver's license reinstatement work, our advocacy work, fair chance hiring and licensing. We know that it's important for fair and equitable courts, and it's essential to our mission as well. So that's why tonight's forum is critical for us. Tonight you'll be hearing from the candidates seeking to serve on the 19th JDC District Court bench. This is our opportunity to learn the candidates and their views and where they stand, not just with access to courts, but case delays, restorative justice, as well as community safety. I'd like to thank our partners again for coming together to make this event possible, and special thanks to our moderator, Mia Monet, for guiding us in tonight's discussion. So of course, thank you again to the community, because without you, this would not be possible. Much respect for engaging in these meaningful conversations, and tonight we're gonna work for a more fair community for everyone. Thank you. Next, we'll have Mr. Yancey with organization vote.
Good evening, everyone. You know, it's very important that people engage in the community and find out what's going on, especially when we're electing judges that's going to be taking care of people that may get in trouble or people that maybe need fair representation and honesty. So tonight, my name is Chico Yancey. I'm with Vote, Voice of the Experience. We're an organization. I'm a former incarcerated person. I spent 20 years in Angola, and I just celebrated the other day of being out 22 years. So, you know, we're involved with making sure that our former incarcerated people got their voting rights, and people need to understand if you've been out of prison or 5 years and you're on parole or probation, guess what? You can register to vote. And you need to make sure that our website is www.voiceoftheexperience. I also work on the C4 side that we also endorse candidates. So we're just heavily involved in the community. And hey, tonight it's going to be a great job. I know people are going to do well. And Mia, welcome, and thank you for doing what you're doing. Missed you on TV the other day, but hey, welcome back. I had to say that. I wanted to get that in, you know. But thank y'all for coming out tonight, and make sure that you engage with the candidates. And guess what? Those questions that you want to know, what better time to ask than right now? And we all have people that may have been affected by the criminal justice system. Some have had bad experiences. Some have had, you know, pretty good experiences. But we need to be engaged as a community. I'm just sorry that more people are not out to be engaged. The election is coming up. But we need to make sure that we're engaged in making sure when we elect people, it's easy to complain. But if you don't participate in the process, guess what? I just left work. I'm tired and everything, but I'm here, and let's get started. Thank you.
Mia, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for the kind words. Just for the record, I took a little vacation, okay? I think I'm allowed that every once in a while. I will be back on air tomorrow morning, though, dark and early. But I do want to jump straight into this because I'm so excited to be moderating this discussion, this very important discussion about the community, like he was just saying. Now, first, for the record, just getting some cleaning details in way. Each of you have 2 minutes per question to answer each question. Now, before we get into the questions, I would like you all a moment to introduce yourselves. Now, you do have 1 minute to introduce yourselves. We'll start with you, Ms. Vicki.
Good evening. My name is Vicki Jones, and I am seeking the position for judge for the 19th JDC. I have practiced law for 33 years in and around this community in courts throughout Louisiana. That's from anywhere from city court all the way to the Supreme Court. So I am taking with me my experience to the bench, and I think the important things are that we maintain integrity and that the next judge have the experience necessary to start practicing on day one.
Okay.
Good evening, all. My name is Dele Adebamiji. I was originally born in Africa, but now I'm in the US. I'm a father of 4 girls, and I've been in this community for 40 years. Since God planted my feet in this community, I've stayed here, and I've interacted with this community. I practice in federal court, state court, city court, and I've taken cases from the beginning all the way to the United States Supreme Court. If you talk about experience, I'm ready to start the job on day one.
Good afternoon, good evening to all. My name is Vernon Wesley Thomas, and a couple of quick words to describe myself: a father, soldier, lawyer, man, and servant. My platform is faith, fairness, accountability, compassion, and efficiency. I've been a prosecutor, I've been a public defender, I've had a private criminal practice, successions, entertainment law, clerked for 2 different criminal district court judges, and I've also been a victim of violent crime here on these Baton Rouge streets. I would say that I believe I'm the candidate that can best bridge the gap between generations, and I hope that I get the opportunity to do that for you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Now, just once again, we are about to get into the questions. You each have 2 minutes per question. These 2 beautiful ladies who are on the front row will actually help me to keep time today. So if they hold up a yellow card, that means you have half the time left, which means 1 minute. And then, of course, if they hold up the red cards, that means time's up, okay?
So we actually have more time to give our openings? That was. Glad you told us
30
now.
seconds,
Okay.
I'm so sorry. The yellow means 30 seconds. That's what it means. Excuse me. Just you, okay. So let's jump straight into the first question. First question for each of you, and then obviously we'll go right to left, my right to left. How many criminal trials have you been the lead attorney on record, and how does that prepare you for the 19th JDC seat?
It's my understanding that the new judge will first start on the criminal bench. When I started my career back in 1992, I practiced criminal law. I have been a prosecutor in city court, and then I also defended cases. So in city court as a prosecutor, I would say over the years, I had hundreds of criminal cases. As far as being the lead attorney on a felony criminal case, I have led those. I think when I looked, I have about 100 cases that were criminal cases, and on each of those, I was the lead attorney.
Well, I've practiced criminal law all my life. My practice involves 60% of criminal practice, both federal court and state court. And if you say hundreds, have done hundreds of cases in criminal cases, both in state court and in federal court. And on each and every one of them, I've been the lead counsel on them. So I've done plenty of criminal cases.
I'm going to echo what everyone else said. Having been a prosecutor, I couldn't count. Having been a public defender in East Baton Rouge Parish, I couldn't count. I've done a bunch of pick and pleas, but I just wanted to say I don't know if necessarily going to trial is the best measure of who you are as an attorney. I think that ultimately putting people in the best position possible to receive the best possible outcome is. And typically when you go to trial, both sides are at an impasse. So I've done it a bunch, but I would rather make sure that I know what's going on with an individual with their particular case.
Question number 2. According to the District Attorney's 2024 Measures for Justice data, 40% of cases are dismissed, less than 1% go to trial, and roughly 6% of cases get pretrial diversion. Half of the cases take over 14 months to be resolved, during which time people can lose their jobs, homes, cars, and everything. With voters shooting down the DA's budget request in the last election, how would you approach this problem with delayed justice?
I am a proponent for not delaying justice for those very reasons. Every time we delay a case, meaning that it doesn't move within the court system, then that's somebody's life who's being impacted. And not just the person who's in jail, but they also have family members, and their families' lives are being impacted. So there are measures that judges can take, like bringing in prisoners on a 701 motion. And that is a motion that tells the DA either you're going to charge this person or you're going to let him go. I don't know, for me, I plan to utilize that effort so that we can have cases move through the system a lot faster. There are a number of cases I've seen where the district attorney has requested continuance after continuance after continuance. A judge does not have to allow that, and I don't intend to be the judge that does allow continuous delays by the DA's office.
Well, all cases are different. All the cases do not have the same facts. Some cases are bettered when they're delayed, and some cases are not. If you've practiced in criminal court and you've tried those cases, you will see that sometimes some cases that were delayed, they get dismissed at the end of it. If you rush to justice, you may incarcerate the wrong person, or an innocent man may be incarcerated. So all cases have to be handled differently. But at the same time, we have to have a check and balance. If the judge sees that the case is being delayed unnecessarily, the judge can step in and force a hearing. But if the case is not being delayed because of some technology that needs to be produced, those can delay cases. So the facts are different, so we cannot generalize if one case should go faster than the other. So the facts and the law that is involved dictates how long a case takes and how soon they go to trial.
So I do believe that everything needs to be handled on a case-by-case basis. I think at the very impetus of the whole situation, if I were to take the bench, I would make sure that I had a conversation with notable defense counsels that are in my section every day, as well as the state, as well as OPD, to ensure that the cases that they already have on the docket are moved efficiently, that discovery has actually been tendered, if there are any privileges that need to be dealt with, or any other outstanding motions, that they're brought very, very quickly. But also speaking to the state to ensure that certain crimes, like, for example, disturbing the peace, or loitering, or criminal trespass, are not billed, and there are alternative ways to deal with those particular cases, because oftentimes those are the ones that seem to clog up the docket.
Thank you. Next question. The local jail has faced concerns about conditions while judges don't run the jail. Your decisions directly affect how many people are housed there. How would you use your role to ensure fairness in sentencing and reduce unnecessary strain on the jail system? Let's switch things up a bit. How about you go first?
So when this question is asked in a bunch of different forms and in a bunch of different ways, I often see people make a rush to crime and punishment. And so for me, I like to tell people that there are so many other issues that a judge has to oversee and ensure are protected. Like, for one, normally the questions that people ask if one of their loved ones is in the system is, one, what happened? What did they allegedly do? Two, how much is bail? Three, can we afford an attorney? And if we can't afford an attorney, is the public defender in that particular section competent? Four, is the judge fair? And so what I want to do is ensure that all aspects of that process are protected so that people can get the efficiency that they're looking for, as well as keep people out of the system if they can be kept out of the system, and then move the process along quickly. Because those four questions, irregardless of where you are in the process, are the ones that everybody thinks about when someone gets, for lack of a better term, caught in the system.
Well, you know, sometimes I think the jailhouse is overpopulated because of the fact that sometimes some judges don't care about the crime committed by an individual. There are certain people I believe should not be incarcerated. If you commit misdemeanor, I don't see any reason why a judge should be holding you in jail. Just because you stole a kind of tuna fish, or you stole a pack of cigarettes, or you stole some cold drink. Those kind of people, those are petty theft. They should not be incarcerated. We should find an alternative for them. I believe that the jail should be made for those who commit violent crimes. You know, you murder someone, you rape someone, you kill someone. Those are the kind of people that should be incarcerated. But for those who committed misdemeanor, I think we should find alternative sentencing for them. We can make them go to technical school. We can make them do other things apart from going to jail. So if we can eliminate those misdemeanors, I believe that the jail will not be overpopulated.
I'm going to start a little differently. I'm going to talk about how the process begins. Typically, when a judge gets a case, it's because a person has already been arrested. They bring you to court. First, you set the bail. That is the beginning of how a judge can basically control how long you'd stay in jail. And I think that should be based on what the offense is. We look at the offense, set a reasonable bail, and bail is not meant as punishment. And that's one of the things that I think gets lost in the system sometimes. Bail is so that we ensure that the person is going back to come back to court. And it's also to ensure that when that person is out, that you've taken into consideration how many previous offenses that they've had. Because although we say violent crimes, there are victims even in misdemeanor offenses. And so if you have a repeat felon or a repeat misdemeanor offender, then I think bail should be set according to whatever those offenses are that they're committing. In addition, once we come to the court, then that's my opportunity, the first opportunity that I'm probably going to see that offender. And so I have to consider what their charges are, whether or not that bail is set appropriately, because a lot of times the commissioners are the ones that set the bail initially. So I still get to address that concern. And part of that also is to make sure that people are not sitting in jail unnecessarily. So I think when we look at the entire case from the time that they're arrested to when they come to court the first time, take all those factors into consideration, and that may alleviate some of the overcrowding in the jail by taking a closer look at each case.
Thank you all so much. Next question. The decisions made in the courtrooms don't just affect the defendants. They affect the families and the community. How do you see your role as judge in addressing the community's concerns about fairness, safety, and trust in the justice system to ensure that defendants have a speedy trial and or resolution to their case? We'll let you go first this time.
Well, as a judge, what you can do to make sure that somebody has a speedy trial is to make sure that when they are arrested and you have the opportunity to set a bond, you have to look at the record of the individual that was arrested. You have to see how many times has he been arrested or how many times has he been convicted. So all those kind of things will play part in the kind of bond you set. It's true that that person might have a job and have a family, but if you go out and you kill someone, the person you kill has family too. So if you want to be fair, you have to make sure that when you set the bond, you think of both families. Okay, you just can't think about the person who committed the crime, say, I want to be fair to him, so therefore I have to turn him loose again. You cannot do that. So the crime someone commits has to, the bond you set for the crime committed by someone has to be appropriate to the crime. So you do not, because some judges do set some high bonds. So if you do that, you should be able to balance the fairness between the victim, the alleged offender, and the family of those concerned. Because if you incarcerated someone, it will affect their family. And if you kill someone, it will affect their family too. So both sides need for the judge to be able to use common sense in doing what, by setting the bond in this case.
With that question, I think that we need to look beyond just the offender and that victim. Decisions that judges make, it impacts the whole community, not just the people that are directly involved in that case. The public, they're looking for certain things from a judge. We look at cases because we see them on court, on TV, or because we hear about them. Well, those people that are looking at those cases, they're looking also to make sure that the system is fair, because they don't know when they're going to come before the judge or before a family member comes before the judge. So the decisions that judge is making, it not only affects the parties involved, it also affects the community as a whole. We have to ensure that the community knows that there's integrity in the system and that their rights are going to be protected, and that that's at the forefront of every judge's decision.
So I believe I touched on this a little bit earlier when I answered a previous question. The bottom line is, while public safety should be number one, there's an entire process that judges have to moderate, observe, and make sure that rights are protected within. And that goes for not just the victim and making sure that they have all the resources that they need, but also making sure that the defendant, who has allegedly committed a crime because you were innocent until proven guilty, has all of their rights observed from the Fourth, the Fifth, and the Sixth Amendment to not just languishing in jail. And I think that when you start putting all of that together, you have to do a very, very interesting balancing test, as Mr. Adebamaji said, looking at the record, but also understanding that for a lot of people, their time is also their money. So the time that they spend coming to court to deal with the litigation, the time that they spend having to go to the bail bondsman, the time that they spend having to speak to a lawyer in their office is both time and money that they're not going to have for their family and for their household. And again, on a case-by-case basis, if I'm able to look at a situation and do a proper balancing test, then the hope is that not only are the victim's safety and the public safety being taken into consideration, but also the rights of defendants.
Next question. Judges are often called upon to interpret and apply the law with fairness and justice for people who come before the court. Describe how you would characterize your judicial philosophy.
My judicial philosophy is that my role as a judge is to enforce the law as it is written. You know, a lot of times people misunderstand the role of a judge and think that we can change the law or apply something other than the law as it's written. And I believe that the only way that we're going to be fair to everybody, which is important, is to apply that same measure and that same standard across the board. So as far as my position, I feel like that when offenders come to court, everybody only gets treated fairly is if the laws as they are written are applied across the board. It shouldn't matter what your background is. It shouldn't matter who your family members are. It shouldn't matter what your socioeconomic status is. You should get the same fair shake when you come to court as a person who may not have the same means that you do. And the only way to do that is to read the law, first know the law. Knowledge of the law is imperative as far as a judge is concerned. And one of the things that you, in addition to knowing the law, you have to have the courtroom experience by having been there to know how the process works so that you can then apply the law as it's written equally to everybody.
I always say you cannot teach experience. It's good, you can sit down and talk theoretically about what the law says and how to apply the law until you are put in that position. If you haven't been in that situation, you can only talk theoretically about how you apply the law. Now, yeah, you apply the law the way the law is written. You do what the law says do. But also, there's something we call discretion when it comes to applying the law. The law also sometimes gives you discretion when you are pronouncing a judgment. For me, I think that's where we need our judges the most. Say, how do you use that discretion? Do you use that discretion for the benefit of the people, the public, the alleged victim, or the defendant himself? But if the law says shall, and the law doesn't give you any authority to deviate, then you have to obey what the law says. But if you have that discretion written in the law, that's where your common sense comes into use. Okay? If common sense tells you, say, do this, then you got to apply it. So we have to be able to know the law and know what the law says before we can apply it.
So I think, and I live by a tenet that, like, balance is key. I understand that knowing the law is key and having experience is key. When I was a prosecutor, I saw just how dismissing a case can take a load off of a family not having to come back to court. When I was a public defender and in my capacity as private defense counsel, I understand how getting a case, I get my time back, right? I'm gonna reclaim my time. But I saw just how having competent counsel made a family feel like they were much more in better hands. And I also saw from behind the bench how the opinions that I was able to draft on behalf of judges gave both a scholastic, balanced, and, for lack of a better term, a forthright understanding about how the law is being applied. The bottom line is that you have to be balanced when you're using your discretion, because everybody is not the same. And if you've ever looked at someone's rap sheet, for example, if you see theft, burglary, then you can probably denote from experience that that individual may have a drug problem. If you see a bunch of violent offenses on someone's record, domestic abuse battery, simple battery, ag second-degree battery, and then maybe a gun charge, you see that's the particular purview that they go under. And so you can't look at everything and treat everything with the same glove. And I do understand that the law has to be applied as it is, but there's a lot of ways that a judge can use balance and fairness to ensure that people are, A, not caught up in the system and languishing in the system for long periods of time, and B, ensuring that the process is protected on both sides for both victims and defendants.
Next question. Restorative sentencing practices are designed to address harm by focusing on accountability, healing, and community safety, rather than just punishment alone. How do you view restorative sentencing as a tool to promote accountability, healing, and community safety for those already impacted by the justice system? We'll start with you.
My philosophy has always been, one glove never fits all. So you cannot apply the same sentence to everybody, and you can't say I will throw everybody in jail and forget them. If you look at criminal law, it's not meant, like they say, 101 law school. It's a criminal law. It's not meant to punish anybody, but to do what? To make sure that you rehabilitate that person so they can come back into the community. The judges can use sentencing to shape somebody's life. I've seen people who are given, second chances, and they make good use of those second chances. And I've seen people who they have given so many chances, they couldn't make use of those many chances. Instead of making use of those many chances, what did they do? They come back and they commit more crime. So the judge, in his own discretion, and realizing that one glove, the same glove doesn't fit all, he can make the judgment, or he can cultivate the judgment in a way that whoever the perpetrator is will know that the judge is just trying to help them. So it's a matter of giving them the chances. You can give one the chance and it may work, and you may give one the chance and it may not work. And when it doesn't work, the whole world will know. That's the judge who said the killer free. But they forgot that it's the same judge who crafted the judgment that gave the other people chances, and they became better people in the community.
Okay, first we need to understand what the restorative sentencing is. That gives the judge the opportunity to use sentencing in a way to rehabilitate that person rather than punish them. So when we look at restorative sentencing, that's when the community is involved. In order for a judge to sentence somebody to some alternative means, we have to have community programs. So throughout this race, I've talked to a lot of the community members and community leaders. I've stressed to them that we need to maintain a community program, and so that as a judge, I will have some alternative sentencing to employ. So I believe that the first road of action is try to put that person back on the straight and narrow. I say all the time, and a lot of my friends laugh about it, is that not everybody who commits a crime is a criminal. And that's what I believe. You cannot judge people by their worst day. You can't judge people by a mistake that they've made. Because give that person the opportunity and the benefit of the doubt. If I can do something as a judge to give them an opportunity to correct that error, then I've not done something for them, I've done something for their families, and I've done something for the community as a whole. And I think that's part of what the judge needs to look at. Look at the person, look at them holistically, and not just at a charge. You're looking at a person, how can I make the best impact on both that person, their family, the victims, and the community as a whole?
So I'm going to take a bit of a different route on this, because I've seen restorative justice and restorative jurisprudence at work. And Chico, I got to put you on blast, because the Miller-Montgomery line of cases that have allowed for a parole hearing for juvenile offenders who have committed first and second degree murders to have a parole hearing after 25 years incarcerated has, in addition to organizations like VOTE, has kind of shaped how I've thought about restorative justice. And you can't, with the case of juvenile offenders that have committed heinous crimes, you can't always just throw them away. And yeah, I understand that there are people that are affected. I understand that there are victims. But there has to be mechanisms in place to allow people to reintegrate themselves into society. And again, I get it more than anybody because I was stabbed 4 times. And I get the fact that people are scared and people are upset and people are frustrated and people want public safety. But I have to implore people that every one of us knows or has somebody in their family that knows someone that has run afoul of the criminal justice system. And we don't want that to be the last imprint that we have of those people. And I understand that people want to see accountability in many, many different forms. But we have to have programs, and the 19 JDC does have some, and I want to go ahead and put awareness out there. There's drug court, there's veterans court, which is very near and dear to my heart because I am a veteran. And there is, there's one other court that's kind of escaping me at this moment, but there are also other programs. And for me, I would want individuals to gain partnerships with AFL-CIO and a lot of the other trade and labor unions out here, because when people have an ability to earn a wage, the chances of them becoming a recidivism statistic go down drastically.
Next question. If a defendant is facing pretrial detention due to inability to pay bail for a low-level offense, what factors would you consider in deciding whether to release them pending trial? We know you just finished talking, but we'll start with you.
Thank you. So we would look at the offense. So I'm assuming you're talking about misdemeanor offenses, theft, criminal trespass, loitering, things of that nature. The code does allow for several of those minor offenses for them to be released on their own recognizance. And I think that is probably a better way to deal with that particular issue than just having people sit in what a lot of folk would consider a debtor's prison. Because if I'm somebody that's, let's say I'm sleeping in a vacant building, right? I probably don't have the $1,500 to post bail. So I'm probably gonna wind up sitting there for 30 or 60 days until my case is billed. And then I'm gonna probably wind up sitting there even longer until I'm forced to kind of plead to a particular crime that maybe I didn't wanna plead to. And so the code allows for provisions, and this is where it goes back to balance. Looking at each particular situation, understanding the situation, the financial situation, the socioeconomic barriers that have affected people all across this particular community, and then making the determination as to whether or not that's a public, or that person is a public safety risk or not, and then make the determination as to whether or not you can release them on their own recognizance, or lower the bail, get a sign-out bond, or lower the bail to a point where somebody can come in and pay a cash bond or a nominal cash bond.
I think about 4 years ago, the Southern Law Poverty group litigated this kind of issue with the Orleans Parish and the Jefferson Parish, leaving this kind of people in jail because they couldn't make bail. And I think in the federal court, it was discussed if that was right. But for me as a judge, if I see those kind of people that you can't make bail because of a minor offenses, like I've always said before, there's nothing wrong releasing them and making sure that they can, so that they can come back to court. You can put them on programs, you can allow them to go get a job. Say, if I release you, if you don't get a job within a month, I'm going to put you back in jail. So you give them the opportunity to go out there and make a living, but not to just leave them in the prison because they can't make bail. And if they make bail, instead of keeping them in the courthouse, those are the kind of issues you can force the prosecutor to prosecute within 90 days or within 60 days, as your schedule may allow. Because those little incidents can ruin the life of those individuals. But if you release them, because what most judges do that I have seen is that if you don't have a GED, they make you to go get a GED. And if you get GED, sometimes they release you. So that's an incentive. You give them incentive to be able to do things that can make them get out of jail without posting bond or without having to stay in jail because they can't afford those little funds to get out of jail.
With respect to not allowing people to stay in jail beyond the time that they need to, my first job out of law school was as a law clerk. I worked for a criminal judge, and one of my responsibilities was to keep up with the offenders on our docket. When offenders are arrested, they are assigned the judge at the time that they get arrested, depending on who's on duty that week. So my job was to make sure that we kept track of how long people were staying in jail, look at the bonds that were set, what the offenses were. If we find that people are in jail and it's because they can't make bond, you can always have them come in on a bail hearing so that at that point we can see what the alternatives are. There are programs in the court where they can look at whether or not this person has a family member who can sign them out, whether that's a case where you should let them out on ROR, which means that they're on their own recognizance and responsible for coming back to court. Also, this can be used with young offenders. I had a case in Ascension Parish where a young guy was arrested for essentially drag racing. That turned into a number of felony offenses because, of course, the police said that he committed I don't know how many other charges when it all started with the drag racing. Well, if I'm the judge and I see that case come in, that is a child. This boy was 17 years old. He had no reason to be sitting in jail. But as the judge, I think it's my responsibility to look at the offenders as who they are and make sure that we are taking into consideration their age, their mental health stage. That's my responsibility to do that and to ensure that they're not sitting in jail without any way of getting out.
Next question. Studies show that race, income, and access to quality legal representation can influence case outcomes. As judge, what steps would you take to ensure that everyone who comes before your court is treated equitably, regardless of their background or resources? We'll start with you.
For someone who's coming to court to make sure that they're treated fairly, I don't choose who their representatives are. People have the right to represent themselves. We can appoint public defenders. And back in my day, 30 years ago, we had judges who appointed private attorneys to represent offenders so that they didn't rely on just the public defender's office or didn't rely on having their families to come up with those resources. And I think we should bring a lot of that back. We had volunteer pro bono attorneys who were there ready to go. And when I first got out of law school, that was a requirement, that you give back and that you have pro bono cases. And I think we should bring some of that back again. But as far as fairness, as a judge, I can't look at that. I can't look at the color of your skin. I can't look at what your socioeconomic background is, not when it comes to how you're treated in a courtroom. We look at those things to determine, like we just talked about with the bail. I'm looking at what your resources are. I'm looking at what those crimes are. So that's the only way that you're going to ensure that everybody that comes in your court is treated fairness and with respect.
Well, I've been practicing for over 32, 33 years, and I've primarily represented criminals in most of my cases. I won't say criminal, I would say I've practically represent people who have been accused of committing crimes. And most of them have gotten off because they really didn't commit it. Now, don't misunderstand me. Okay, I believe that there are some innocent people in jail. It could happen. And why would that happen? Like you just said, your representative may be your problem. It may be your fault. But as a judge, I can help you select who is the best person to represent you. But at the same time, I will not allow your fight. Look, I represent a lot of people who cannot afford to pay me. And I do it because I love what I do. Okay? So if you see those kind of people in your courtroom, compassion should come to your heart, but that doesn't mean you will bend the law for them. You will apply the law, as it's supposed to be applied. Your financial status should not determine how you apply the law. Even the Bible tells you should not pervert justice. So we all need to know that we need to apply justice with equal hands on both sides, either rich or poor.
So I'm going to go back to what I said earlier about it being a balancing test. Because part of my platform, the first part of FACE is fairness. And when you talk about fairness, you're talking about making sure that people are treated with equity, but also understanding that every glove does not fit every individual. And I'm going to be very, very clear. I have seen rap sheets where I've seen people have certain types of offenses, and that tells me that an individual, if you're stealing food from Walmart, it's very different than if you're stealing electronics to sell on the black market. You know, if you are using drugs, if you were a user, it's very different than being a dealer. And an individual's rap sheet will oftentimes show that. And to be very frank, everyone is looked at on a case-by-case basis, and you try to apply fairness as best you can, but it has to be a balancing test, because while everybody is not supposed to be given a different set of circumstances when they're coming before a judge, when you're reading affidavits of probable cause, when you're reading the facts of a particular case, you're gonna look at it from a particular perspective. And if you've seen it a bunch of times, that's the first thing that's gonna play in your head. But you have to make sure that you're balancing not just what is alleged to have occurred with protecting the process, with protecting the rights of the victim if the victim is a person or a juridical entity, but also the rights of a defendant who may or may not have a legitimate reason for being where they are at that time. So again, it all comes back to balance.
Now that was the last question that I had. We would like to open the floor right now for anyone in the audience who has a specific question for a specific candidate or all of the candidates. Would you please come up and stand by Cherie over here in the corner, and you can ask your question. Anyone in the audience with a question for a candidate?
Before we start the questions for the candidates, from the audience, we just want to give you an opportunity to take maybe just a 5-minute break, drink some water, and gather yourself, catch your breath.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll keep this show moving. Ready? Okay. So once again, we are calling for anyone in the audience who has questions for the candidates to please come forward.
We have 3 individuals that have identified that they have a question. Would you all come up now? You can go first. Say your name.
Good evening. My name is Thomasina Joseph. Could you please share an overview of your experience with criminal trials? Specifically, how many criminal trials have you personally handled or been involved in over your career?
We'll allow you to go first, Ms. Jones.
Okay, as I said before, when I started my career, I started as a law clerk for the criminal judge. For about the first 10 to 15 years of my practice, I handled primarily criminal cases from a defense side. While while working as a defender and defending people on the criminal side, I was also a prosecutor. So my experience with criminal cases are both from the prosecutorial standpoint and from a defendant standpoint. And I had hundreds of cases in city court when I prosecuted criminal cases, and I defended hundreds of cases in district court over the 10 or 15 years that I did it.
Well, for me, practically, I would say for the past 32, 33 years, I've been a defense counsel. I've never prosecuted before, and I don't have no interest in being a prosecutor. But what I'm saying is that, when we're talking about how many trials I've had, you got to put in perspective. Is it from federal court? Is it from state court? Or is it from city court? All these courts have levels. And as you go up in all these courts, the difficulty in trying cases in all these courts goes up. The case you try in federal court, you may not be able to compare it to state court. And the one you're doing in state court and federal court, you cannot compare it to the one you do in city court. The city court is the lowest court you can have, which is what they do is misdemeanors, basically. I cannot give a number of how many cases I've defended and which I've been the lead counsel, both jury and bench trials. It's just impossible for me because I've done a lot for the public defender's office, which is pro bono. I've done a lot for them also, including my home private practice. So I can't put a number on it.
I also am not going to be able to put a number on that. Having been a prosecutor, I've had multiple bench trials. On the defense side, being in the East Baton Rouge Parish Public Defender's Office, I had a number of trials. In the military, I was a prosecutor for the 95th Civil Affairs Brigade, and I prosecuted sex crimes, so I did a lot of trial work there. And then if we're accounting also my time as a staff attorney for 2 different criminal district court judges, I've been a part of drafting per curiam, which is their written opinions, quite often. So I can't give you a number. I can just tell you that I've been at all 3 levels, prosecution, defense, and behind the bench, which gives me a 360 perspective on criminal law.
Next question.
Thank you all for coming. I know we come up here and we hear a lot of different answers and kind of set off questions, but I'd like to know, how do you handle cases where you have a personal bias or a preconceived notion about an issue, and how will you ensure that that ideology doesn't affect your ruling?
Mr. Adebamiji, we'll start with you.
Thank you for pronouncing my name well. And, for me, I think that comes down to your faith and justice. If you know you as a judge, for me, if I know I have a bias concerning a particular issue, and I know there's no way I'm going to be fair, I will be glad to recuse myself. Nobody will tell me to recuse myself. I will recuse myself. Because of what? Because I have a bias against it. If you have a bias and you think there's no way I will be able to do a good job, you're lying. Because deep down inside you, one way or the other, you will still be biased. For me, I won't have any problem recusing myself at all.
I'm sorry, brother. Part of your question kind of threw me. Were you talking about from an advocacy perspective, or were you talking about how we're handled as a judge? Because I got kind of both elements of that. Okay, so you want to know how I'm going to deal with it as an advocate. So as a defense attorney, everybody has the right to competent representation. And when you're paying me privately, you're not paying me for my biases, right? And you're paying me to make sure that you have the most competent representation that you can afford. From the public defender standpoint, it was ensuring that as a part of Gideon's Army, I had the requisite ability and skill to make sure that you and your rights to counsel were protected. As a judge, you have to kind of turn that around, because you have to see everything from a neutral and detached perspective. That's why they call it a neutral and detached magistrate. And that's the best and simplest way I can answer that question for you.
And I understood the question as being how I would handle these biases as a judge, not in my... Right, okay. So, right. Okay, so first of all, if there's a bias to the extent that I feel like I can't be fair to the person, and if I know somebody in the case, well, then I'm required to recuse myself. First, I have to make that known to both parties. If I know either one of the parties, or if I know anything about the case before it ever starts, I have an obligation to provide that information to both the prosecutor and the defense side, so to see if they have any objections to that. But I know now that being a judge is going to be very different than me being an advocate for either side. So when I take the bench, I'm taking the bench knowing that I have to look at every case and every person equal. I have to start with a blank slate. And that is the obligation that I have and the pledge that I'm making as a judge, that whatever my personal biases may be, I have to put those aside so that I can look at the case from an even standpoint to both sides. And that means that I have to listen to the case, listen to the evidence, and then apply the law to that case. My personal opinion and my personal feelings have no place on the bench.
Next question.
Just want to ask y'all a question, because me being a victim of the judicial system myself, it's happened to me as a judge, as a prisoner that was innocent. I would like to know that all y'all have been involved with the law all this time, so y'all know about the injustice that occurs downtown. And I want to know, because of y'all familiarity with all the wrong things that go down there, would that help you be a fair and just judge? The reason why I'm posing this question is because as a judge, some judges have promised us inmates things and caused us to plead guilty to things that we wasn't guilty of. And then the promise they gave to us, they turn around and they agreed with the district attorney and the attorney himself that would deal would be, but then they changed their mind. But we know that the law says that what is said in court and what is promised in court as a judge, you got to uphold that. I'm saying that because I'm not going to call the name, but when I went to prison, innocent, I got in the law library and I did a lot of study. So I had to fight to regain my freedom. I've even represented some of the, I'm not going to call the name, of the people that's sitting up here right now, clients, and had to bring them home. So I just wanted to know, as being a judge, well, each one of y'all, can I ask you, will you be fair? And will you be just and give the people what's promised? And if you promised them something, will you uphold it?
Mr. Thomas, we'll start with you.
I think I opened my mouth and started answering the question, so I'm in it now. Excuse me, sir.
What's your name?
Sir.
Okay.
No
Not a
worries, no worries. If I'm understanding what you're saying, you feel that there is a lot of unfairness that goes down to the 19 JDC, correct? And you feel like oftentimes that officials and lawyers are all in on the jigs? Okay. And then I also think what you're asking is what I would do if elected to ensure that this is not the case. All right. So I think for you, and what I'm hearing you saying is that you want a level of accountability from an elected official, right? All right. And you want transparency from an elected official, correct? But, so did that answer kind of where you, because there was a lot to unpack there, and I want to make sure I got it right on the head. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for your question, sir.
If I might,
yes.
let me add something else to that. When you were talking about, going to court, and if you're promised a plea deal, and I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, when you were given a plea deal and either the prosecutor or your defense attorney, somewhere along the line that wasn't upheld. Well, when plea deals are made, those should be made they should be known in open court. So the judge, in order to uphold that agreement, needs to know what that agreement is. And I believe that if a prosecutor makes you a promise to give you whatever sentence, they have to stick by that, and a judge can do that. If a prosecutor has promised you probation, well, I can't then come back and change that. You have to hold them accountable. You have to hold them accountable, and you have to have transparency.
Well, let me back that up for 1 second. Just because the prosecutor and the lawyer has a deal doesn't mean that the judge will allow it to stand. The judge can refuse the deal that the prosecutor and the lawyer has. The judge is not bound by whatever the prosecutor and your lawyer agree on. You can get there, you can agree that you will get probation, and the judge will say, no, look, 3 weeks ago, I have a guy who is in jail, and I worked a deal out with the prosecutor, and the guy was backing up 10 years. And normally, if you plead to a misdemeanor, most judges will not violate your probation. But after we finished the deal, the judge said, no, even if he pleads to a misdemeanor, I'm going to violate his probation, and he's going to serve his 10 years. So sometimes those judges don't agree with what the prosecutor and your lawyer agree to. So that's why in federal court, well, you see, now you've changed the fact pattern of the question. Okay? So that's quite different from what the answer you were asking before. If we're going to be fair and impartial if we become judges. And I believe that, if you know you cannot be fair and impartial as a judge, then you don't need to run for the position of judgeship. Like the good book says, do unto others as you want God to do unto you. So if you know you're not going to be fair and you're not going to be impartial, you don't need to take the bench. But for me, my faith, like I say, controls me. So, I always like this side in the book of James. It said, he who knows what is right to do and fails to do it, to him is imputed as sin. So looking at that, there's no reason why I cannot be fair to people.
We've said a lot of...
Ooh, I'm so sorry. Thank you guys so much, but we do have to move on to the next question from the audience. Thank you so much, anonymous audience person, sir. We appreciate that.
Thank you for everything y'all done. My question is, if you had the opportunity to implement something based on what you do in the trials and the judging that you do, if you had the opportunity to implement one or two things in the community, what would that be?
Well, if I have the privilege to institute something, it will be number one, trying to get our youth off of the street. For me, that's my number one concern. I believe that if we can get our youth off of the street, I think we can do well. Look, I was raised as an African child, okay? I know in America, you can't raise children the way they raise us in Africa. They beat me like they're going to kill me. But it wasn't because they hate me. Okay, it was because they say that devil that's in the heart of the child, a rod will do what? Exactly. So that's African perspective. That's how we do it. So we parents too, we need to take responsibility for our children. Sometimes I'm driving down the road by 7 or 8 o'clock. I see youths like about 9, 10 riding the bike down the street on Hairline Highway. My first question was, where are their parents? Because I know I will not allow my children to be out like that in 7 or 8. So we as parents are going to have to come together and take a better stance to see what we can do. Not even as judges alone, but parents to come together and see what can we do to get our youth off of the street at the time they're not supposed to be there.
You want to go next? Ms. Jones.
One of the things that I think that really lacks in our court system is taking and paying some attention to mental health issues. Mental health is a big issue and a big problem in our society. So we need to find, if I were to implement something, in my courtroom, it would be centered around addressing our mental health problems. A lot of times we see offenders come to court, and it's very obvious that they are dealing with some sort of mental defect. We need to have a way to address those people differently. So that would be the number one. Number two is, like Deli said, we have to reach our youth. And the only way we're going to be able to do that takes the community. I would need community outlets, places to send younger offenders. Now, in district court, the youngest offender that I will probably see that's not a violent offender may be 17 or 18. So I don't think that that's too late to change that person's life around, but I need some community programs to be able to send that person to. But my number one is mental health. We have to address that.
Two things. First, unfortunately, oftentimes, judges are in a very reactive position. Every time I talk to people in the community, they ask questions about economics, about the laws that are on the books. And often, my first answer to them is that that's a legislative issue, right? The first thing that I would do is I would create a program where judges get far more involved in the legislative process to understand the laws that are put on the books and how they affect the community before they're enacted, right? And so that would go a long way to assuage some of the issues that we're having in the courtrooms with some of the backlogs and some of the laws that we feel are unfairly targeting our community. The next thing is making sure that when people are convicted and they're on felony probation or they are coming home on parole, is ensuring that the courthouse itself has a program that reaches out with trade unions to allow people to have jobs and earn skills that can then give them an opportunity to earn money. Because the bottom line is that, yeah, I get it. We want to stop children from getting into the criminal justice system and running afoul of the prison industrial complex. But what do we do for everybody else that's there that's coming home? Because a significant number of people who are going to be released every day, and what are they being released to, right? So we need to have something in place and a mechanism in place and a program in place that ensures that those individuals, those people, right, not just offenders, not just felons, people have an opportunity to reintegrate themselves into society and make money so they're not part of the recidivism rate.
Thank you so much. That was all the questions from the audience. We will now have things turned over to the Power Coalition.
Awesome. Before the Power Coalition comes up, I do want to say something briefly because there were a few of you that did not get an opportunity to ask your question. If you did not get an opportunity to ask a question that's burning on the inside, please go to our social media page. This forum is being shared on social media at the community partners pages, JAC, as well as SULC. We're sharing it on social media as well as Beacon Light. So you still have an opportunity to ask your question publicly. Also, too, we have the contact information of all of the candidates. Everyone that came in, we asked you to sign in for a reason. We wanted to be able to share that information following the forum with you. So don't feel as if your voice has not been heard by all the candidates. You still have an opportunity before the election, and I'm going to turn it over to Power Coalition.
Good afternoon, everyone. First off, I want to thank Beacon Light for letting us use this facility for the debate tonight. I want to thank our partners, Justice for Accountability, Ourselves Power Coalition, Southern University, Dumps the Polls and Vote, and our moderator. Thank you for coming out tonight. And first off, to everyone who came out tonight and listening to these candidates. The judges that we elect to this court make decisions that touch every corner of the community. These choices will affect our families, our safety, and the trust in the system. That's why our roles doesn't end tonight. It begins tonight. The responsibility now is to take what you heard, share it with your neighbors, encourage your networks, and most of all, show up to the ballot box. Because when we do participate, we strengthen justice. And when we strengthen justice, we strengthen community. And that's what it means to be a power voter. A power voter votes in every single election, hold elected officials accountable, and promotes equity and justice in the community. But before we can become become power voters, we need to be registered voters. And if you have not taken time already to be a registered voter, please find me at the back of the room tonight, and I can help you register tonight. And we have QR codes. If you have anybody who needs that, they can take my card, which will be at the table. So now, I'll leave you with this. The future of the courts are now in our hands, and of the candidates, of course. And let's use the power wisely as power voters and neighbors, and as a community, be committed to justice. Thank you, and have a great night.
Again, we want to thank Beacon Light for allowing us to, and Pastor for being so hospitable for us today. Thank all the candidates who did show up tonight. We appreciate you all for being here. The community is very engaged and interested to hear from you all, so we appreciate you being here. Also, again, we want to thank the community again, because this shows just how engaged you are. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. And if you have not, like you said, registered to vote or check your voters registration, please do so. Today is National Voters Registration Day. So what better way to celebrate for all of us that have social media? Take a picture and be sure to remind someone else. If we're registered, we're doing our civic duty, but bring someone else with you to the polls as well. So make sure you're registered. Online registration ends September 20th. Be sure to get that deadline in online. Check online to make sure that you can vote early in the election if you can. Early voting, early voting, early voting. Or you vote on October 11th. Thank y'all so much. Good night.